which was published as a book in 1957 with the title A World Restored. I said that they wanted to restore the old order. It was about how these two giants, Castlereagh and Metternich, shaped the debate among the nations and cooperated with each other from different motives to maintain peace in Europe. It's a very interesting read. Let me tell you a story, my personal story about Dr. Kissinger. What was I doing there? I was chief of protocol in the middle of a presidential visit to the United States. And the president wanted to see Dr. Kissinger and wanted to have his opinion or advice about the Prime Minister. But my role was to receive him and escort him to the Korean president. But the president was not ready yet. So I took that time to show off what little knowledge I had about Dr. Kissinger. Kissinger wrote many books. In 1994, he wrote a book titled Diplomacy. Diplomacy, such a wide subject. It was a very interesting book, which I read in Cote d'Ivoire. I had so much time in the office, I read it through and through. But later on, one of my friends said, oh, Diplomacy is such a masterpiece. It describes Dr. Kissinger's realism. Realism? No, it's not a book about realism. It talks about high efforts to reform and revive the United Nations. And he should retake the advantage of the large trend of interdependence of our world and the need for closer cooperation. He worked very hard on all fronts. He succeeded in introducing reforms in the UN management system, in ending or alleviating some regional conflicts. But it was so difficult. Why? At the United Nations, the staff had a vested interest in the all-flawed system, and they resisted changes. The member states had divergent interests on most of regional conflicts, which made it very hard to reach consensus or agreement among them. Unfortunately, they later blamed such failures to UN Secretariat or the Secretary General. But that's our job, to be a scapegoat and take the blame. Mr. Ban did come away with some successes on the political front, like Kosovo or Cote d'Ivoire, but they were not very well known to outside people. You never knew that there were success story in Kosovo or Cote d'Ivoire. So it was known only among the UN people. On the other hand, those issues that affect the whole world are more or less the same, gave him more chances of success and more authority to work with. Of course, even those tasks were still very tough and required extreme patience and persistence to take on the Herculean task of presenting various options to all the member states and persuading them to come to a consensus or agreement. As an example, I was at the 2009 Copenhagen Climate Conference, which everybody expected to be very successful, because they thought that there was a consensus among the nations how serious the threat of climate change was. And from Secretary General Ban's point of view, climate change was totally a new issue for him when he took over the office of Secretary General, but he studied very hard, and he wanted to make it a flagship issue for him. So from the first year, he convened a summit meeting to take on climate change issue. So in his third year, he thought he was ready. But it was not that easy. So in hindsight, I think it also had to do with the euphoria and high expectation the world people had about President Obama. Because he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in October 2009, and this was in December. So everybody thought Superman Obama will do something about climate change. But it didn't work that way. So Copenhagen was a catastrophe. China, the biggest emitter, was not ready yet at the time. China now produces the most solar panel, and they have all the technologies and industrial capacity to meet with the climate change. not poor, but they are getting better. But at that time, they thought this was a shackle upon the developing country that helps the developed countries to widen the gap between the developed and developing. And India was not ready, and BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, they were still not on board. So, despite the hard work of President Obama and the Secretary General Ban, I was in that meeting room. I was in the meeting room with the 27 heads of state. And I saw President Obama going around in many corners of the table to persuade other people, but it didn't work. So it was a shame. But that experience gave us a good lesson about what we were missing in the deal we prepared. And we had an idea about a new platform to work on for the following UNFCCC COPs. UNFCCC, you may know, is United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And COP is Conference of Parties. So the COP took place every year, Cancun in 2010, and Durban in South Africa in 2011, Doha in Qatar 2012, Warsaw in Poland 2013, and Lima, Peru 2014. So progresses were made little by little, and many issues, big and small, were addressed, gaining momentum and creating the foundation for the Paris Climate Agreement. In December 2015, the adoption of Paris Climate Agreement was a huge triumph for multilateralism. Let's see. Okay, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is really triumphant here. On the left is Cristina Figueres, the Director General of UNFCCC. On his right was Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius of France. And further to the right is President Hollande. So this was a big moment for the United Nations and the international community. Actually, before that, in September, Secretary General Ban had also succeeded in leading the world to adopt a new set of goals to replace MDGs. We now know they are SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, which was hailed as his biggest success along with the climate agreement during his tenures at the helm of the United Nations. By the way, the United Nations is a frequent customer to the Nobel Peace Prize. This year, we remember World Food Program was the winner. When related bodies or persons have received the award 12 times, while it took place 7 times during its first 55 years, so maybe every 8 years, UN was the winner. For the last 20 years, it happened 5 times, so every 4 years. So I would interpret that the world appreciates the role of the United Nations or United Nations bodies more and more, and we now see how multilateral forums can achieve many important things for whole humanity. I may sound biased, but in 2015, S.G. Ban should have won the Nobel Prize for the climate deal he achieved. But the outcome of the climate summit came out too late in December, while the Nobel Committee announced the winner in October already. And the winner was the Tunisian National Dialogue Quartet for its contribution to democracy in Tunisia in the wake of the Jasmine Revolution that started in 2011 for Arab Spring. And the final year of S.G. Ban in 2016, the President of Colombia, President Santos, was successful in ending the decades-long civil war that took so many lives of Colombians. So he got he deserved this Nobel Peace Award, but there was no departing gift for Mr. Ban. Too bad. So, and then I described the aberration, the Iraq War, but now we had another aberration in the war, which was the unexpected election of Mr. Donald Trump. His catchphrase of "Make America Great Again" and his transactional attitude was a big roadblock to all of us, particularly to multilateralism. So he undermined the basis of our collective work with multilateral bodies by walking out of climate agreement and cutting the funding to various international bodies. But at the same time, I think he reminded us how important our collaboration on the multilateral front has been, and also how important common sense in our society was. Sometimes an aberration is undone by another aberration. We now see his days of manipulating people's anger and frustration and getting away by dubbing anything negative to him as fake news or making blatant lies were cut short because the world was hit by COVID-19, coronavirus. Corona is a Latin word for crown. In astronomy, corona means the rays you see coming out of the sun, which you can see only during solar eclipse. So now coronavirus, in a way, made us see how unscientific and unscrupulous his way had been, and it gave a big impact on the last US presidential election, and we know the reason. I hope that we will have back the world where common sense and reason prevails. And the Paris Climate Agreement was saved right before the cliff because US was supposed to leave the deal for good once President Trump is re-elected. And many important works on the multilateral front will be restarted for the whole world community because we all know that President-elect Biden is a multilateralist. Usually the democratic governments are more for multilateralism. But we should not be too complacent, but stay alert against those pitfalls of selfishness, unscientific thinking, or even nationalism, into which we can be easily trapped again. Some people say, I think it was Dr. Kissinger, that COVID-19 pandemic ushered in a fortress mentality by which we are just concerned about taking care of ourselves, not minding others outside of our own fortress. But from a different perspective, the pandemic should be another case that teaches us about the need for a collective response by the international community. And lets us discuss what are the most effective ways to fight against the disease while minimizing the government's inevitable friction with our privacy and human rights. Only a multilateral approach can provide such opportunities that lets us see clearly and improve our systems. Korea is a middle power country. We are not superpower, but we are not so small. Middle power countries like Korea will benefit from multilateralism, which relies more on your intellect and willingness to reason and debate, rather than sheer national power or resources. So we need to come up with our strategy to maximize such benefit by making use of multilateral setting. I'm not saying that this kind of multilateral diplomacy at the UN and international organizations has totally replaced other types of old diplomacy. We still need the classical bilateral diplomacy as basic form. Korea needs to maintain and further strengthen the Republic of Korea, the United States alliance with our geopolitical conditions and work with other major powers surrounding the Korean Peninsula. We also need small multilateral gatherings like six-party talks we used to have to utilize for our management of our bilateral relations. As a practitioner of diplomacy, I still see many of fellow diplomats who are still biased toward bilateral diplomacy. And one American diplomat put it like bilateral diplomacy is life or death matter, and multilateral diplomacy is a vision thing. I think it's a very, very good comparison. Bilateral diplomacy or individual interest is about survival. It's about survival of your own people, of your own country. But vision thing is about long-term work that should be done. So in a way, if you think about the theory of evolution, or Darwinism, every organism cares first about the survival. But the next thing they do is propagation, meaning making as many offspring as possible. So for our posterity, we better continue our work at the multilateral setting to make the world a better place to live. Now, once the peace is secured, and if we have peace, extended peace and globalization. So I like to emphasize that the importance of multilateral diplomacy is rulemaking and norm setting. Because on top of addressing those challenges like climate change and pandemic, the international community needs to develop new norms to catch up with the rapid advance of technologies like social media, drones, AI, and self-driving cars. We need new rules. Individual countries can come up with those rules, but we need to standardize, and we need our discussion on a multilateral setting. And we, Koreans, should be prepared to make our own contribution. We should offer our ideas and experiences, learn from others, and if necessary, we should be ready to share the burden. Otherwise, we will miss out on those important discussions, and we will not be able to have our views reflected on those deliberations or outcome documents, and we will not be able to protect our interests as well. So, I'd like to tell you, students of CAU GSIS who already have deep interest in international affairs can be our valuable assets to be deployed on the multilateral front, either as diplomats like me or experts like our dean or Professor Chu and